EMR, Faxing Out. One of the powerful features of prognosis is the ability of being able to correspond electronically with other providers of care. This, of course, can be done through email, which we've covered in other videos here on the Resource Center, but faxing remains a popular option as well for clinics. Well, within prognosis, there are two versions of faxing. One of those is the cloud-based model known as PrognoFax. Now, this does support outgoing faxes only, but the benefit is that for you as a local practice, there are no phone lines or hardware required. There is also no additional setup required locally. There is a transaction cost involved, so you would want to follow up with your sales rep or accounting if you do not already have this model. The standard version is BizFax, where you locally host it. Now, this supports both outgoing and incoming faxes based on local preference, and that would determine the number of phone lines and modems that would be required. Because BizFax is hosted locally instead of through the Prognosis Cloud setup, you would be responsible for having a dedicated fax server or personal computer that has these phone lines and modem connected to support the faxing utility. And in addition, there is some local setup that would be required on that local fax server by our implementation engineer or technical support. Now, the locally hosted model does not incur additional licensing costs. Regardless of the model you choose, both the PrognoFax cloud-based model as well as the BizFax local model operates the same way to the user. All of the applicable outputs is faxed the same way. This would be whether you're doing a referral or a consult letter, your meaningful use summary of care, medical record requests, as well as lab and radiology orders or prescriptions that you are faxing. And then for tracking your fax status throughout the system, there are various tabular reports available so that you can see those that are in process, those that have failed, and those that have succeeded. So I'm going to go ahead and toggle into Prognosis. I'm logged in here as one of my front office staff, Amy Farrah Fowler, and we're just going to open up our chart for Diego Martinez. Now, separate videos here on the Resource Center discuss how to create the orders, how to create the prescriptions and the letters, so I'm not going to go into that level of detail. However, I am going to open up each of those screens so that you can see how the faxing would occur. First of all, I'm going to go under my Patient tab and choose Letters Out. Now, as I mentioned, there's a separate video dealing with the Letters Out screen, so I'm not going to go into detail about the entire module. However, as relates to faxing, the most important piece, of course, would be to get the fax number onto the correspondence. We have three ways of doing that. The most obvious, of course, would be simply to type it in. You see that I do have a fax number field, and I can simply type in the number. Now, notice I am not typing a 1 or a 9. I did type the area code. All of those dialing properties, which may vary from one practice to another, are handled during the setup. So whether you are using the cloud module of PrognoFax or a local setup where dialing properties are configured on your local fax server, our engineering team would take care of that when they get you set up, so that as a user, you do not need to worry about it. Now, a second means of populating the fax number would be here in the upper left, where we have patient-specific contacts. Now, this, of course, varies from patient to patient based upon the data that is stored on the chart under patient register, patient attorney, patient insurance, and so on. So, for example, I see here that his primary care physician number 1, his cardiologist, happens to be Dr. Pauline. If that's who I'm sending the referral to, I can choose her and then click my Go button, and notice it automatically populated the fax number as well out of my referring doctor master. The third option would be at a system level master then. If we do not want to free text the number and it is not somebody already associated on the patient's chart, then here on the right hand side I have a drop down of my system masters so that I could choose out of our insurances, our employers, address book, attorneys, and so on. And the same functionality would apply. If the fax number is included and I select it, then it will populate for my letter. I'm just going to go ahead and leave Dr. Pauline in here. Now, with regards to the actual correspondence, faxing supports both predefined templates, such as our letters here in the lower half, as well as ad hoc documentation if you just wanted to type a quick note. I'm going to go ahead and choose the consult referral letter. Now, you'll notice here in the middle I have an option called Fax Cover Sheet. You can predefine a cover sheet to be included separately along with the documentation you're faxing by selecting this checkbox, or you can deselect it, and then the documentation would be sent over the fax without a cover sheet. So that would be your local preference. Also notice the attach button when you are dealing with medical record requests. If you need to attach the applicable documentation from the chart while you're faxing the outer letter, you can come in here and select the appropriate ones. And then those attachments as well as the cover sheet would also be included with the actual letter itself. I'm just going to go ahead and click Save. And then in my action icons up here next to my printer, I have a fax icon. So to fax it, I'm simply going to click that icon, and it is now faxing in the background. And this again is true of both models. The cloud-based PrognoFax as well as the locally based BizFax functions the same way for the user. Now this fax icon is universal on all the screens where it is applicable. I'm just going to go ahead and go to Diego's Encounter now and show you that that icon also exists on our prescription screen. Now, of course, most of you are probably going to be e-prescribing, but in some situations you may want to fax the prescription, so the provision is here. When it is such a miscellaneous pharmacy, as we see here, we do not have the ERX indicator. If you want to verify there's a fax number, you can click the address button. And in this case, I do have a fax number, which means I can fax the prescription. If not, and you knew it, you could go ahead and add it at this point. And then as long as the prescription has been completed, notice we have the same fax icon. Same is true on all of your other CPOE orders. So if I go here to Lab, for instance, my Bayfront Laboratory Services, I can click my fax. Notice in my status now, it actually shows in parentheses when it updates the status to ordered that it was ordered by faxing. We will also see that on radiology. My order's already been entered and approved. I'm going to fax it. And now my status updates to show ordered and faxed. So wherever that fax icon is within Prognosis, whether it's on your letters out for referrals and meaningful use summaries of care, if it's on your prescription, your lab, or radiology order, once faxing has been enabled within your practice, it will be applicable for all users of the system from any Prognosis workstation that has been set up. Now, as regards tracking the status of your faxes, under Report Tabular, there are a series of fax reports available. Under Classification, if you just type in Fax Report, now these are standard reports that come with your library. Of course, you can have custom reports added as needed within your practice. Now this top report is inclusive of all statuses, in process, failed, or successful, based on the date range that you specify. Whereas you can also get individual reports per status, such as faxes pending, faxes failed, faxes sent, and also a specific one for prescription. So in review, faxing within Prognosis has two models available. There is the PrognoFax, which is for outgoing faxes only. It is a cloud-based module hosted by Prognosis, and there are transactional fees applicable. Or there is the locally hosted BizFax, where there are no additional fees involved. However, you must locally host the server as well as the phone line and modem. The functionality of both models to an end user is the same, both with regards to transmitting the fax as well as the outputs. Those outputs would include letters out, which are referrals and consults, your meaningful use summary of care, any ad hoc letters that you create, medical record requests, as well as any CPOE requisitions, such as your prescriptions, lab, and radiology. And all of the faxing statuses is available on your EMR fax reports to show whether they are in progress, failed, or successful.